Hello, I'm Errin Haines, 19th News Editor-at-Large, and I'm so glad to be joined today by Gretchen Carlson, internationally recognized advocate for women's rights. And certainly you may remember her for her bold actions against Fox News chairman, Roger Ailes. Gretchen, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really glad that you're speaking with us about this topic.
So glad to join your community. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think I just want to start by asking you how you're thinking about justice, even in the years since your situation at Fox News, how you're thinking about justice today and what that can look like.
Yeah, so I believe, and my nonprofit Lift Our Voices, we all believe that justice is about owning your own voice. And we believe it starts there. If you don't own your own story and your own truth and your own voice, then how the heck do you ever stand up and speak up about anything else going on in your life that may be unjust? So that is why we are fighting so hard to get rid of these silencing mechanisms that have kept these horrible issues at work in the dark. And the number one question I get, Errin, from survivors when they reach out to me after they've signed an NDA, for example, is, well, I really just want to own my voice again. And then it's too late. So the work I'm doing is to try to make sure that people are not even put in that situation anymore to be silenced. And so for me, justice is the truth, and it's owning your own story and being able to speak it.
So Gretchen, do you feel that even as people are raising their voices, that those voices are being heard and that more people are getting justice? What do you think about in terms of kind of what justice looks like after folks have raised their voices in some of the ways that you're talking about?
Yes, I believe that we have come so far in the last 6.5 years since my story, and then 5 years since Me Too. I mean, first of all, women are being believed. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but we weren't before. And there are consequences now. And I think that the general public realizes, as well as lawmakers, that this movement is not going away. So as I always say to companies or to lawmakers, get on board the train because it left the station. And then as an organization, we are trying to make sure that we work hard to eradicate these silencing mechanisms so that people can actually get justice. So the two things that we see as the evils that keep these issues secret are forced arbitration clauses in your contract at work, or even just in your handbook, or even if you click on an email, and non-disclosure agreements. And last year we were successful in passing 2 federal laws that get rid of those so people can seek justice in the court of law, which is their 7th Amendment right. And we were so successful in getting those bills passed into law, which are the biggest labor law changes in the last 100 years.
So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Talking about even your situation and the impact of NDAs on you, an interesting thing that I just learned talking to you that I hope you will share with our audience. I certainly saw the movie Bombshell, and I know a lot of other people have. That was your story, and yet you were not even allowed to participate in the telling of that story. Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, I'd love to be able to tell you my impressions of the movie as well as the miniseries, The Loudest Voice, that was on Showtime, but I'm not allowed to. So not only could I not participate in any of these projects about my life and my truth and my story, but I can't even comment on whether or not I think the portrayals are accurate or not, or whether or not the storyline is accurate. And so, you know, look, I have often said that these movies and the miniseries, they did a great service to our nation because, first of all, the actresses took on these roles, Nicole Kidman and Naomi Watts. I mean, they were high caliber people who said, yes, I want to tackle this issue. Hollywood said, yes, we're going to do a movie about sexual harassment. Would have never done that 6 years ago. And the American public learned so much from it. And even if it helped just one woman or man to know that they could come forward and it would be okay, then they are successful projects. So even though I've demanded Fox to let me out of my NDA, which I had to sign upon resolution with them, they have never responded to me. And the other way they get you, Errin, is that my NDA is with 3 parties. My NDA is with the parent company of Fox, then with Fox News, and then with Roger Ailes' family, even though he's dead. It supersedes to his wife and his son, who's only 24 years old. So he's probably going to outlive me. And I probably will never, even if one party said, we'll let you out, maybe the other 2 don't. So, you know, this is how we've kept these issues silent. And the number one thing I heard from so many survivors after my story was, thank you for being the voice for the voiceless, because the exact same thing happened to me. I was shoved into arbitration, never to be heard from ever again. And by the way, they never work again either. Or on top of arbitration, I also signed an NDA. So it's like a double whammy. I can never tell even certain family members about my life, not to mention the mental health aspects of not owning your own story.
Yeah, what you're saying is really so important. And I just have to say that this is raising for me just the question of, whether it's part of justice for you, really just being able to get justice for other people, the thing that you cannot even get for yourself, helping people to really have the voice that you don't get to have because of your situation and because of that NDA.
I thought you were going to say is getting out of my NDA my own justice, but you nailed it. Because I often say, well, first of all, this will be my legacy. I was a journalist for 30 years and no interview I've ever done, including world leaders and presidents, will even come close to the work that I'm doing now. And this is not about Gretchen Carlson. This is about the millions of people that I'm helping that I will never, ever meet, likely. And so what you said, Errin, is so true. I am seeking justice for the people that maybe don't have the same platform or the same resources to be able to fight for it. And I wake up every morning and know what's ahead for me, because I will not stop until I get this done for every protected class. No one should face discrimination or harassment or assault at work and be silenced as a result of it. And people around me, and even people on the Hill, they know I'm relentless. So when they see me coming, they know I'm coming for another vote.
Okay, so you mentioned the legislation that you got passed, the Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault Act, which we've written about, and the Speak Out Act. Both of those were passed with bipartisan support in Congress last year. Can you just talk about each of those pieces of legislation and the challenges, frankly, that you may have faced in trying to get that legislation passed, and what the impact already has been, if you can talk about that?
Yes, so getting the arbitration bill passed was a 5-year slog. Passing legislation is almost impossible. And when you factor in that we live in the most hyper-political time of our generation, the idea that we could bring two parties together who, for the most part, don't agree on anything on these issues and find common ground was miraculous. And so a 5-year journey of me trying to pretty much convince Republicans to come on board with this, because getting rid of these silencing mechanisms is a much more democratic issue. And I knew I needed 10 Republican senators in the Senate to be able to get past the filibuster. And so, we started strategizing about who to go to. So we went to people who were retiring because we thought they might be bold. We went to trial lawyers because oftentimes they've seen the injustices in the system already, and that proved to be true. That's how we got somebody like Senator Josh Hawley on board, who you would never think would have supported this, but he was a trial lawyer, so he had seen the injustices. And of course, we went to women. And that's how we got Murkowski and Collins and Shelley Moore Capito. And every time that we got another Republican, my kids were actually involved with me on this. We would do a dance, happy dance in the kitchen and write their name up on the refrigerator. So this was a long process of getting to the point where we knew we could get it passed. And Errin, I think what happened was that over that 5 years, there was really a tonal shift amongst members of Congress who had voted against it the first go around in 2017, but realized what I was saying earlier, that this movement is not going away. And I would say to them, raise your hand if you think it's okay to continue silencing women and men in the workplace who are assaulted or harassed. And then I would see no hands, and I would say, all right, now we're going to have a discussion about this. The other big point is that these issues are apolitical. When somebody decides to assault you or harass you, they don't ask you what party you're in because they don't care. This is all about power. And so that was, a huge message. And it was so interesting because members of Congress would almost immediately start telling me stories that their wives had told them or their daughters had told them. And they were proving my point. So getting to that moment where we finally passed it unanimously in the Senate and then in the House, and being with the president and vice president last March 3rd with my family with me and so many survivors and the bipartisan coalition, and being able to sign that into law was one of the biggest events in my life. And I knew it was going to help so many other people. And then the strategy paid off because we were immediately able to introduce the Speak Out Act, which takes away NDAs for sexual misconduct. And that went through the system and passed in a matter of 8 months. So we got 2 of those laws passed in the same year, but we are far from over. We're going back for more.
So you actually walked right into my next question, which is, what is next on the horizon for you legislatively? You had those 2 huge legislative wins last year, but I get it, right? You say that you're not done.
Yes, so at my nonprofit, Lift Our Voices, our mission is to eradicate these silencing mechanisms for all toxic workplace issues. So all forms of discrimination, whether it's race, gender, age, disability, LGBTQ+, you name it. We want to eradicate silencing all of those groups, because it's like a 2-tiered system now that we were able to pass the sexual misconduct one. People who experience that won't be silenced anymore. But if you're the CEO of a company, do you think it's okay to continue silencing somebody who's discriminated for gender, for example? And so we are already tackling amending the arbitration law coming up in the next couple of weeks to add another protected class. And our goal was this from the beginning, was to bite out of the apple, get a bite out and get this accomplished, and then go back and get more. And we're already working on that. And then we're very active at the state level where you can be more progressive. So in New Jersey, California, and Washington State, you can't use NDAs anymore for these kinds of issues at work, only for trade secrets, which is how it should be. And we just introduced that same legislation in New York State, and it is going for a vote, we hope, before the end of the session in New York in June. So we've seen huge ramifications of even state laws passing, because companies that are based in those states then have a real problem in front of them. Are they going to force people into silence in states that haven't passed these laws? Or are they going to just get rid of NDAs overall? And we've seen the domino effect. Companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Google, they decided globally to get rid of NDAs now, because they knew that there potentially would be an uprising of employees and saying, this is not fair. And we're kind of hoping that that happens, actually. We're also going to be putting together a corporate grading system this year, which is huge. We'll be the first group ever that will be able to tell you what companies silence you. And it will be a huge benefit for employees. And it's also a subtle push to companies to get on board and take away these silencing mechanisms.
Okay, well, definitely keep us posted on that. As always, at the 19th, we are going to be paying attention to see how that legislation progresses, that policy really around these issues. But I think, as we're closing our conversation, Gretchen, just a couple of more things I want to ask you about. One, I think I would like for you to talk about, for people who are seeking justice and trying to take that first step to really finding their voice, what advice is there that you have for them if that is currently where they find themselves, where you once found yourself?
Yes, and I always start by saying it's such a personal decision. With all of the people that I try to counsel, or at least correspond with via email, they say to me, should I come forward? And I don't want to be the one that says yes because of this. You will still face potential penalties for having that voice. Now, I'm trying to change the culture too, but I'm going to say a big statement right now. Passing 2 bipartisan laws last year was easier than changing culture and the way that we handle these issues. And so laws help to start moving the needle, but we start forming opinions about all these things early on, and then we bring them with us to the workplace. And so I implore CEOs to set the tone from the top. Imagine if every CEO said, I'm not tolerating any of this where we work, and we're not going to silence you. And when you come forward to tell us that there's a bad actor, we will get rid of them, not you. That starts to change culture. That's not the way that it's currently working right now. And these silencing mechanisms help them get away with it. So, my advice to them is such a personal choice. But in my book, Be Fierce, which was really a guidebook for this, I would tell you that chapter 4 is my 12 points of what you need to do. The top 3 are, you have to consult with a lawyer briefly to find out if you actually have a case. Do you have statute of limitations problems, et cetera? Number 2, you have to document, because we still live in a he said, she said environment. And number 3, you have to tell some people, because you have to have witnesses who can vouch for you. We're seeing that in cases all the time now, right? Somebody has an event happen, and then they can go back and show that they sent an email to somebody saying what happened. It's really, really crucial. And bring that information home from your work, because I've heard from so many women who did document, and then they were fired when they came forward and they couldn't go back to their office. So these are just a couple of the points, but And the last thing I would say is go to the press, go to the 19th. Because if there were ever a time when the press cared about publishing these stories, it's still now. And that is such an integral part of this in helping us all find our own voice and justice.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. And I mean, look, you brought up workplace culture. So I do kind of want to close out by asking you about this current intersection of journalism, gender, and these workplace-based sexual issues. Your former employer, Fox News, recently fired Tucker Carlson, and the allegation is that there maybe were some sexual issues at play and that there's a lawsuit that's pending. There's a whistleblower there in that situation. So I just kind of wonder what you make of that current intersection and what you think that it says really in terms of justice and accountability in this space.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I've been very vocal about this because in a nutshell, there's a big, huge difference between conservative or liberal opinions on TV and outright lies. And that's what Fox was doing in the election cycle and continued to do, and lied to the American public, which I feel is a complete disservice and a threat to democracy. With regard to, oh, and let me just add that as I said in my op-ed in the Daily Beast, if you do not do a full-scale change and get rid of all the people who promulgated those lies, then there won't be meaningful change at Fox News, because they can just put anyone else they want to in those time slots. And if they also start talking about the lies, then what change really happened? With regard to the whistleblower, Abby Grossberg, she and I have been in contact. She's sort of the next iteration of what I started. And I think she has much more information and ability to know how to get it done. But she is the brave woman who's now taking on this fight. And I think it's very interesting that it always pretty much comes down to women who are willing to stand up, speak up, and be brave. And I really actually believe that it's her accusations about the misogyny and the sexism that was happening, that she claims was happening to her at Fox. I actually believe that that has more to do with the firing of Tucker Carlson than the Dominion lawsuit, because Fox has claimed that they have cleaned up everything about their toxic workplace culture. And maybe that's not true based on her lawsuit. And it could be that that actually supersedes the lies they were saying about Dominion. So in my mind, I feel like her lawsuit was a crucial part of why Tucker Carlson was fired, because you have to ask yourself, why were none of the other liars fired yet, right? So that's why I feel like her coming forward had a massive impact on shining a light on allegedly what the environment was there.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on that. And Gretchen, thank you just very much for really talking to us about using your voice and what that means in this overall conversation that we're having about justice today.
Thank you. Liftourvoices.org. If people want to jump on the bandwagon with us, we'd love to have them. Thanks for having me.